Hey everyone, welcome back to the Generation Y Conservative Podcast. I'm glad that you could join us tonight. Tonight we talk about the possible resurrection of Tim Allen's conservative comedy that left ABC last year. It might be making a return, so we're going to find out a little bit more about that. We also hear from a legal immigrant and why he's pissed off at the whole illegal immigrant situation right now. Also, a topic that I really want to hit tonight, it'll just blow your mind when we actually get to it. A video went viral of a man confronting his bully years later. And now we are seeing what the bully calls an apology as even more details surface from his past. We also have vegans protesting outside of a restaurant and the owner's hilarious response. A man stands up for the Second Amendment in front of his peers and makes one hell of an argument. We add two more stories to the transgender pile that points to societal and sporting advantages for those transgenders that are involved. And in our main topic tonight, we talk more about the Second Amendment debate, the Parkland teen activists and what they're up to, and a story out of London that may put a damper on their agenda. We talk about these topics and more. This is the Generation Y Conservative Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Generation Y Conservative Podcast, where the truth is greater than agenda. I'm glad that you could join us tonight. If you're watching live right now, you're watching it on Facebook Live, which I appreciate. It's kind of a little behind-the-scenes thing that we like to do before the final release on the radio station, which I'll mention in a little bit, and the final YouTube version, which is edited with a few more details and pictures added in and everything. We're on a little bit of a hiatus for about 2 weeks now, 2 to 3 weeks I think we've been off. Not to brag, but I was in Hawaii, so swimming with sharks. And that was the first week we were gone. When I got back, unfortunately, we had a hospital situation, and it's taken us to this point. So we are back. We're getting ready to get back into the things, and my co-host is not with us tonight because he is spending the night with his wife for a date night. So I think we'll be back with Mike next week. But in the meantime, if you are watching or if you're listening in, you can follow me on social media. As I mentioned before, you can search for the Generation Y Conservative on Facebook and find the page, hit like, and get notifications for when we go live or to follow along with the stories that we find interesting or funny. Also, if you are interested, you can follow us on Twitter at Gen Y Conservative without the E on the end. You can interact with me there and get involved in some of the fun stuff that we get involved with the hosts on the radio and everything. You can also find me, more importantly, on YouTube. Just search for the Generation Y Conservative, hit subscribe, and then hit that little bell notification because, unfortunately, YouTube's algorithms are kind of working against us conservatives right now, and you won't be notified when new videos are published unless you hit that bell notification. We've also been uploading movie reviews to that as well, and we have a couple more things in the pipeline that we hope to put out there too, hopefully starting this summer. We have a couple ideas for that as well. Also, this podcast is re-aired on Sundays from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on KLRN Internet Radio. You can find me on there, the audio version, if you want to listen to it, download it. You can also head over to iTunes, where they have graciously put the podcast on there as well. You can find it under the Generation Y Conservative Podcast by KLRN Internet Radio. So you can find that there as well. So, now that we've got that out of the way, according to MSN, Fox is considering bringing back Tim Allen's hit ABC show, Last Man Standing, after Roseanne's success. Roseanne debuting, it was either last week or 2 weeks ago. Tim Allen's Last Man Standing was canceled last year, much to the dismay of its fans, many wondering aloud if the cancellation was due to Tim's well-documented real-life conservative views and his conservative character on the show. We actually covered this on the podcast last year, and we're pretty upset at the fact because at the time, it was actually ratings gold, and the studio or the network was trying to say that the reason why they canceled it was because the pay for the actors was getting too high. But if they're bringing in the ratings, that doesn't even make sense. Why wouldn't you keep a hit going? I find it surprising that actually Netflix wasn't the first one to pick this up, but it seems like details are kind of leaning towards the fact that Fox may be picking up this show, and we may be seeing it come to that network instead. So based on the massive ratings that Roseanne got on its debut, totaling 18.2 million viewers, clearly there is a huge group of people ready to embrace a conservative comedy show. Roseanne's character is a proud supporter of Donald Trump and conservative values, just as she is in real life. Now, this is from MSN. Let me tell you something, first of all, in regards to Roseanne. This line right here, where it says that she's a supporter of Donald Trump, I got that, and conservative values, completely false. First of all, she ran for president, or tried to run for president a couple years ago under the Green Party label, and was very far from any type of green values. There's actually an interview that you can watch where she talks about how the people on Wall Street should have capped incomes and shouldn't make any more than $1 million, because nobody needs to be making more than $1 million, which makes me wonder how much she's actually making. And that those that do make more than $1 million or refuse to get rid of that money and redistribute it, should literally have their heads cut off at the guillotine, that the guillotine should be brought back, and that's exactly what she said. So Roseanne's nutty. She's not for conservative values, but she is a Donald Trump fan, so that is one thing that they got right in the article. It says, due to the success of Roseanne, TMZ reported on March 29th that Fox is seriously considering rebooting Last Man Standing, which was originally aired on ABC. When ABC initially canceled Last Man Standing, it denied that it was given the boot because of politics. It's ABC. At the time, Tim said he was stunned and blindsided by the network I called home for the last 6 years. Last August, he told Fox News that the support from all the fans to bring back Last Man Standing is truly overwhelming to him and so appreciated. He said, I, along with the talented writers, wonderful crew, and terrific actors, would definitely entertain the idea of bringing the show back, as there is so much gas left in the tank, more to be said and laughs to be had. This was a great show, a favorite among my family as well in the household, and it was good, clean comedy, which is hard to find nowadays. It did have a conservative bent to it, but at the same time, the boyfriend of his daughter had an extreme liberal leaning, and his arguments to Tim Allen's character sometimes made Tim Allen's character think, and maybe not completely change his mind, but both sides were, I believe, fairly represented in the show. Now, if you were looking for more raunchy humor and a conservative bent to it as well, you might want to check out Netflix's The Ranch and go back and watch the previous seasons of that. That was actually it's a really funny show. Unfortunately, Danny Masterson, as another topic that we covered in the podcast, and the whole Me Too movement, was let go of the show because he allegedly sexually abused some former castmates or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but that's a great show, especially Sam Elliott, who's the father on the show. Just a really funny guy. All right, so from The Blaze, a woman who led a Bible study in her condo is now saying that her group has been banned from doing so in the common room. A condominium in Port Charlotte, Florida, has a common area used by groups for movie nights, game nights, and other activities. Donna Dunbar, resident at Cambridge House Condominium, says that the condo HOA has banned her Bible study group from using the space. Dunbar's 9-person study group has been meeting each week for nearly a year, and in February, the HOA board said that the group was no longer approved to use the space and adopted a resolution banning prayers and other religious services, observations, or meetings of any nature from the condo's common spaces. With the help of First Liberty Institute, Dunbar is bringing a federal complaint against the HOA with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the nonprofit legal organization says that she has a case for discrimination. Now get this. What's more, she told WFTX someone placed a sign on the community organ reading, "Any and all Christian music is banned," with an exclamation mark. What I find fascinating about that specifically, it seems to be put there by people on the board, is that it says Christian. Christian music is banned. I don't know if we're going to get like an old timers Condominium Footloose reboot going here for a movie in the near future. But what's fascinating about that is the Christian part, right? I mean, if they wanted to say any and all religious music is banned, that would be one thing. But it seems like they're specifically seeking out to discriminate against Christians in this portion. Now, does this fall in line with where we fall in hypocrisy terms, at least, with the businesses that don't want to get involved, that are Christians involved with certain types of religious ceremonies and stuff? And I believe that it does go along with those thoughts, because this person lives in this condominium. She pays those dues. She is part of paying that HOA fee and everything, and is supposed to be able to use this common area just like everyone else for whatever they want to have. And I can guarantee you that there's some meetings in there that are probably not as hearty as a Christian group meeting up. I'm willing to bet that there's some illegal card games that probably happen in there between old people, and who knows what else. But the fact of the matter is that this is a discrimination case that's being brought forward by the First Liberty Institute. I heard an interview with her on the radio recently. And with the First Liberty Institute, and they were talking about this and how these cases are being brought to them from all over the country, especially in regards to things like prayer in school, where teachers, this is actually a really interesting story. One of the cases that they have going on right now is a teacher went to another teacher who was having a hard time. She knew him from church, asked him how he was doing, and said that she was praying for him. Someone caught wind of the fact that she said that she was praying for him, and it got back to the administration, and there was action taken against her, saying that this was a strike on her record for bringing up religious things, and that any further incursions or instances of this would result in her firing. Well, this was brought before the First Liberty Institute, and actually won. It was struck from her record, and the school was put on notice, as other schools should be as well, that can't do that type of thing, especially in a private conversation. It's not like this teacher was using her platform as a teacher to try and indoctrinate kids into the religion or anything. She was showing concern to a fellow teacher who attends the church with her. So it's just ridiculous. The Daily Wire reported on a story about how California town erupted over sanctuary city policy. So at a town hall meeting on Wednesday night, over 60 fired up residents of Escondido, California, voiced their passionate opinions on the state's sanctuary city policy before a city council vote concerning the Trump administration's lawsuit against it. Opponents of the sanctuary policy, including U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, argue that it's unconstitutional and a detriment to public safety. Escondido City Council voted 4-1 in favor of filing a legal brief in support of the Trump administration's lawsuit, and the council decided, it says here that the council decided to file a legal brief in support of the lawsuit, which challenges the legality of 3 state laws enacted last year. Among them is a statute that limits cooperation between local law enforcement and federal immigration authorities, according to Fox 5. The hotly contested pre-vote town hall included the voices of legal immigrants outraged over the sanctuary policy that shields local law enforcement from cooperating with ICE. So here's just one video of one legal immigrant's passionate plea to this town hall. So let's take a look at that real quick.
You, as an immigrant myself, I came to this country 45 years ago with me and my mother, okay? 45 years ago, we were not offered sanctuary. We were not offered an easier, softer way, okay? We were told you have to be an American citizen, and here's what you have to do. And we did it. And if I can do it, every single person that's a dreamer in this room can do it. Every person that's undocumented in this room, they could do it too.
As we had mentioned before, I have 2 very close friends that I may interview at some point in time who are legal immigrants to this country. Actually, one of them was just on the vacation with me. And these legal immigrants seem to be even more passionately pissed off at the fact that the the illegal situation of people jumping the border and coming across and doing things the illegal way and taking advantage of the American society through the welfare system, food stamp system, as well as being paid under the table, not contributing to the tax system, and not all of them, as Trump was accused of implying, but a lot of them are committing crimes and showing up in prisons wearing different colored jumpsuits, which is a portion of this man's testimony in front of this town hall that wasn't discussed in this video that was cut out. But he says that there's a few different colors that represent different illegal immigrant factions, I guess you could say, and it's overwhelming. I mean, we've talked before about situations where illegal immigrants without a driver's license got into a van, drunk, driving along, and killed families in a car. Now, could that have happened to the family anyway? Well, even the religious argument, I might even say to you that God felt it was their time to go in a certain manner, and who knows if they would have gone that way or some other way in a different circumstance. But the fact of the matter remains, it would not have gone down that way had those people not been in the country illegally in the first place. So it's become a real situation. We've even been talking about, obviously, the most popular video on the Generation Y Conservative YouTube channel right now is the San Francisco policies leading to a mass exodus in San Francisco, California. We've talked about this a couple times now. People seem to think that I'm associating specifically the illegal immigrant situation to why people are leaving. And although it is one of the reasons why people are leaving, it has everything to do with all the liberal policies. A lot of people are commenting that it's not because of the illegal immigrant status, or liberal policies at all. It has to do with the high taxes and the high property values and everything else, and high property taxes. And the fact that everything is really expensive. Well, take a step back. Why did your taxes go up? Why are your property values high? Because of the taxes. Why is everything so expensive? Because of the liberal policies that are put into place. Now, some other people are making the argument, too, that California happens to be one of the largest economies, not in the country, but in the world as a whole. I believe it actually, as a state, could compete as its own country as between the 8th and 12th largest economy in the world right now. But the fact of the matter remains, while some people are saying that California doesn't need the United States, but the United States needs California for food and everything, is kind of a lie. Jerry Brown showed that last year with all the wildfires and everything else, where he actually requested federal aid from Washington, D.C. to help because the state was under such stress financially. So California always has to fall back on federal aid for everything because they're so maxed out on the finance situation. They may be one of the largest economies, but if they had to rely on solely themselves, they would have a hard time, and they would have to fall back on taxes and do a couple other big things because they're not getting that federal aid anymore. So it goes both ways. Does the United States need California for its crops and farming situations and everything, or its wine? I guess a lot of people in New York would probably argue that we need California for the wine, and probably all over the place, I'm sure. But the fact is that we need them for their crops. They need us to support them in all their crazy liberal policies to upkeep the economy for them as well, too. The whole new California deal that was going through or trying to be pushed through, where they would separate off the blue coastal areas because a lot of the inner portions of the state are more conservative. I honestly hope they are able to do that because it's getting to the point where something needs to be proven, and people are not getting the point that California is a real problem with the liberal policies that they propose, and the fact that it's one of the largest states along with Alaska and Texas, that they're very unfairly represented in Congress as well. Okay, so let's keep on going here. All right, so we listened to him. Speaking of people going in front of their peers for issues, the next story is absolutely stunning. I think we have a lot to talk about on this part. So let's start with a Texas man who is speaking in front of his local school board and what he had to say. So let's listen to this first.
My name is Greg Barret. I graduated from KSD in 1983. I started in 1975 with Mr. Lance. My legal name is Greg Gay. I was bullied, unbelievably bullied. I started out and I had teachers that bullied me. I had kids that bullied me. Even the coaches, I had nobody to turn to. One day at lunch, I had my head shoved in the urinal where it busted my lip. I had laid on the ground in a fetal position as the kids kicked me. I got up, I rinsed my face off, I walked out of the lunchroom, walked straight to the principal's office, and he told me, these kids will grow up someday. They won't always be like this. But yet, here I am, covered in urine from laying on the ground underneath the urinal. My lip was busted, and they sent me home. Well, I went home, and I got the 45 out of my father's drawer and put it in my mouth. Because at this point, I had nobody in the school system to help me. Is that the way this is going to be? Lance, you were the one that shoved my head in the urinal.
Mr.
Thank you.
Tell you what, this is unbelievable.
Now, we've talked about bullying in the past. Bullying is obviously an issue and always has been an issue. This is nothing new, although it's portrayed as something new. And it has evolved with the times as well. One movie that I've always pushed on the podcast and to other people in public as well is a movie called Disconnect with a guy from Horrible Bosses. I forget his name offhand. But it's an incredible movie that kind of brings up the times for people my age and older on people that are dealing with the bullying situations and how that's moved to the online world as well, and how we need to be keeping a closer eye as much as possible without a complete invasion of privacy with our kids. Although if you're a parent, it's easy to make the case that their privacy isn't really that much of a concern over their safety. Bullying has always been around. I think that people are a little bit too sensitive nowadays, but it's something that's always been a problem, and I'm not saying that it's not a problem. Here in this case, what we have is Greg was bullied as a teenager and goes in front of the school board in the Katy district in Texas. Now, this video is one of those webcam videos because most school board meetings are typically broadcast live on the internet for people that can't make it into the boardrooms. We did that here in our own school district as well, or continue to do it when I was on the board. And goes in front of this board, and the superintendent of the school board is Lance Hindt. And he is the one, it turns out, that bullied Greg when they were in school together and shoved his face into a urinal and did some pretty horrible things, and the school just didn't back him up, okay? And yes, you could say in regards to the being a little too sensitive nowadays that probably back then they could have been a little bit more sensitive because bullying wasn't taken so seriously. But this video went viral very quickly, as a matter of fact. Within a week, it just took off like crazy, which, before I get to that, I don't know if you noticed this, but on the video at the end there, as Greg walked away, you could hear the superintendent, Lance, say, "This is unbelievable," and then start laughing about it. I think that portion right there is the reason why this video went so viral. Had Lance taken the opportunity to say, address the situation and say, "My gosh, either I remember it or I personally don't remember this situation, and if that was me, my gosh, I'm so sorry. Obviously things have changed in my life, and I think that's a great example of what people shouldn't do, and if it was me, make up a good apology on the spot. You're a superintendent." And we're going to get to the perks of being a superintendent in this specific school district. But it got to the point where Lance was so consumed by the amount of hate that was coming his way because of this video going viral that within a week he had to address again the school board and the public of the area and people around the country, for that matter, with his own apology. So let's take a look at his apology for a second here as well.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Board. And if you don't mind, I'd like to comment. As indicated, I've spent 27 years dedicating my life, my passion, my commitment to my family, to my students, to staff, and to the communities that I have been privileged to serve. But folks, I recognize, I'm telling you, I recognize I am not a perfect person. I don't think anybody in here really is. And I do recognize that. While I understand the perception, please know my reaction this past Monday night was one of shock. It wasn't one of disrespect or insensitivity. I was purely shocked. You know, to the hometown that raised me and where I now proudly serve, I regret the negative attention that's been brought to this community in the past week. Ultimately, I'll be judged by one person.
Yes, yes.
And that is
Yes.
God, my Lord and Savior. That's who will judge me. Now, moving forward, I pray, and I ask everybody to pray, that our combined efforts will continue Katy ISD's commitment to providing, as I tell my staff all the time, providing a safe and secure learning environment for our 78,000 kids and our 11,000 plus employees, what I call our superstar staff. You know, serving this board in our community, I'm telling you, is the greatest personal and professional privilege of my life. Who gets to come home and do what I get to do? And for that, I am telling you, I am thankful. And I would like to personally thank this board for your unwavering support. And I'd like to thank the community that's here to support me as well. We've got a great school district, folks. We've got a great school district. And I look forward to continuing to push this district forward so we can continue to be recognized as not only the best in the state, but the best in the country. Again, thank you, and let's move on.
What an apology! It blew me away. I'm in shock here that he didn't apologize. First of all, I mean, here we are. We're waiting for this apology. Hey, Greg, things have changed. Invoking Christ, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too, after we get to one more detail that surfaced in the meantime. But his apology was not to the person or people that he may have bullied at the time that he was a student. His apology, and the only apology, and you could go back and watch this, is to the public for bringing a negative spotlight to the school district. In the meantime, you can see in the last video that the room was virtually empty except for maybe 10 people, which is much more than you'll find in most public school board meetings. It's usually pretty empty unless there's something that's being talked about that riles people up, like in this case here. But I also have to tell you too that these school board meetings can be very staged as well. I have found myself watching and participating in school board meetings where the odds were stacked to look like the opinion of the public was in favor of a certain situation, just because they got the word out a little bit harder than everyone else. In this case, this superintendent found enough people to fill the room to applaud him whenever possible. You missed the applause at the beginning. I cut it out because there was a lot of wasted time of probably about a minute and a half of applause from the audience before he even starts to speak on the situation. He stacked everything against the person who was bullied in the room, goes on to not apologize to the person who says that he was bullied, and then at the end, after invoking Christ as his Lord and Savior, then at the end goes on to say, let's move on. Well, of course he wants to move on. Look at the type of attention that's been brought to him specifically and this school district. Yeah, I think his main objective right now is to move on. But in the meantime, some more details have surfaced in regards to Lance as well. I said, now this could possibly be chalked up to as one man's word versus his accuser, and we can't really tell which way to go. But then some more information came out against the superintendent. Apparently, the Katy ISD superintendent was once sued for a fight that allegedly left a man in a coma. According to ABC 13 in Texas, we are now learning about accusations made 35 years ago that Dr. Lance Hindt once got into a fight that left a man in a coma for 5 days. The lawsuit alleges then 18-year-old Lance Hindt left a party on the night of February 18th, 1983. The lawsuit claims that there were large amounts of alcohol and drugs and that junior high students were present. The lawsuit says that he was taking his girlfriend home in his car when he encountered William Stein, who had just returned home from having dinner with his wife. Stein hollered for the teen to stop speeding in an area in an alley where kids could be playing. How disrespectful. Maybe Lance is the victim here, right? The automobile came to a sudden halt. It then backed up, and the driver got out of the automobile and rapidly approached me, venting anger while I was standing on the edge of my driveway and alleyway, Stein described in the lawsuit. Now, I want to talk about something like this for a second here. It talks about venting anger as he approached him rapidly. I encourage you to actually go back and watch this video of Lance's apology again, because he shows to me, and I'm no psychologist, but I could have a couple friends who could get involved in the conversation too. He shows classic signs of someone that has pent up, bottled rage, trying to control it as much as possible. When you go back and you watch this apology video, he is shifting in his seat. He seems to be clenching and holding back on just outright letting it fly. I think that's a sign that you can see something. I'm not a professional on the matter. I'm not a psychologist, as I said, but I think that those who are familiar with bullies, when they are present in front of the public and not showing the signs of their actual bullying in person, I think you can actually see that type of behavior with him in that video. So I would encourage you to go back and look at that. It says Hindt allegedly shoved Stein against the neighbor's fence, striking the man in the ribs with his fist. Stein blacked out, only to awaken 5 days later from a coma on February 23rd, 1983. According to the lawsuit, Stein suffered blunt trauma to the head and face, resulting in a skull fracture, lacerations of the upper lip, contusion, and an injury to his right eyelid. Also, there was a separation of the right shoulder joint and fracture, plus fractures to the third and fourth ribs, the statement read in the lawsuit. I do not feel I have fully recovered at this date due to weakness in the right arm and dizziness caused by the trauma to the right side of my head. The Katy athlete, Lance, who went on to University of Oklahoma on a full football scholarship, so the guy was obviously big and empowered at the time, admitted that he never sought medical help for Stein at the time of the incident. So he admitted at this time to this incident. So this is in the records as something that actually did happen. The lawsuit also alleged that Hindt had been involved in more than a single fight in the 5 years leading up to Stein's beating, a fact that Hindt never denied. So this isn't the only instance as well. This is what we like to call a pattern of behavior, by the way. In the end, the now Katy ISD superintendent never faced a penalty, with the exception of splitting the court costs linked to the lawsuit with the boy who threw the party in 1983. So let's talk about a couple things here for a second. Lance, in his apology, went on to say that there's only one person that can judge him, and that's his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. That was my Texas accent there for a second. Here's what I find interesting on that. I am not going to judge his level of Christianity, because I myself have many faults myself as a Christian. But if you are truly a Christian that is upset about this situation, I believe you would repent in a form of apology to Greg and say, listen, obviously I had some times in my past I'm not proud of. I may have bullied some people. I had some of my own anger issues at the time, and that's all in the past. And I can tell you right now that some of those things are the exact reason that I had to face reality and come to Christ at a certain point in my life. And I'm sorry for what I did to you, but I feel like, I have to apologize to you right now, but I will face that judgment later on in my life or in my death as well. And then you could launch into everything else that you said. Whether or not Greg accepts his apology is on Greg at that point then. Is the apology enough? I don't know. We didn't get to that point. We are not seeing that come to fruition because Lance did not allow that to happen. There was no closure for Greg. And he also didn't deny the bullying of Greg either, or that incident at all. All he did was apologize to the public for bringing a negative spotlight and that he wanted to move on from the situation. Well, just in case you don't know statistics or facts about this situation, Katy ISD happens to be the 8th largest school district in Texas, so it's up there. Lance has a salary that ranks as the highest in the state. His salary comes in at $375,000 per year. Now, I know times are tough in education and it's hard to get pay, but my word. Okay, now this type of thing is probably a discrepancy between the administration in schools and teachers and the union and stuff on where the pay goes and everything and who's more deserving of what. That's a discussion for a whole other time. But he is not only supposed to be judged by God in the end. He is supposed to be held responsible by the constituents in his district. This man is specifically overseeing school districts with the children of the constituents in that area. He should be judged. He should be a good representative. And, I am all for forgiving people for their past. There's people that I know that were bullies that had done some mean things to me that I am friends with now because I accepted their change in attitude and lifestyle and everything. But the fact remains, this guy could have used this as a perfect teaching example as a leader in the community to dispel bullying situations and say, yeah, you know what? I have my own past. We're not all perfect. I may have bullied some people in the past and I got better. I learned my lesson. I'm here today as your superintendent to help people see that bullying is an issue and we need to bring this to the forefront. None of this has happened. I don't know what needs to happen from here for Lance to come to a realization or for the Katy ISD community to come to a realization, but had he apologized, had he admitted to these things, had he done all that and then talked about Christ and forgiveness and people showing him grace and everything, maybe then we could move past this and continue with him as being a superintendent. But his actions throughout this whole case and the history leading up to it have shown that he is ill-equipped to be a superintendent of a school where bullying is supposed to be a central issue, where they're trying to take care of it and alleviate those types of situations. If I were in that school district, I would be raising hell at every school meeting about this man as much as possible. The only way to get things done, unfortunately, is to show up. There's a couple other stories that I posted recently, and we've talked about this before as well, that it's hard to sue a school district and make change because the people that are involved in the decision making, whether it be the board, who in most cases don't get paid for their positions anyway as elected officials, or the administration, or if the teachers do something wrong, when you sue a school district, I don't really even think that they learn their lesson in these cases, because you end up suing the taxpayers of the school district. If they have to pay out an enormous sum of money, they're going to go back and raise the millage of the taxes in the area to help pay for that lawsuit. So in the end, you just end up pissing off your neighbors because your property taxes and everything else go up for you. And what happens to the people that are responsible for the decision making? They don't give a rip because they don't have to financially pull anything from their pockets or bank accounts to alleviate that situation or lawsuit, unless they happen to get fired. If they're in a position where it's an elected position or something like that, then maybe they have to fear being not elected again. But that's about it. This is a pretty sad reflection of some of the things that are going on in school districts nowadays, but it's also an even bigger sad reflection of bullying and people not showing personal responsibility. I think that's another thing too, is we have a very large personal responsibility problem in this country. According to the Daily Mail, a black mother is outraged after her son, who's 8 years old, is sent home with a pamphlet on white privilege and ends up asking, "Mommy, are white people better than me?" Now, Amber Pabone says she found the two-sided piece of paper detailing white privilege in her 8-year-old son's folder after he came home from Hunter Magnet Elementary in Raleigh last month. The pamphlet explained how white people were overly represented in the government, military, and media, and how that gives white people privileges not afforded to minorities. She says that after he came home with the paper, he asked her, "Mommy, are white people better than me?" Pabone is outraged about the pamphlet because she thinks her son is too young to learn about systemic racism. This is a pretty interesting point. We've talked about the types of videos that are produced online and have gone viral on YouTube and Facebook and everything, of showing things like the minority family sitting down with their daughter or son and talking about how they're supposed to properly act when they get pulled over by a police officer. And we had our own feelings on that, and how we felt that it was inappropriate and that they were approaching the subject wrong. You're a parent, you have to approach it the way that you want, but that to me solidifies in the minds of young people that cops are the villains, and you have to approach the situation very sensitively and then go forward. That's a whole other topic. We've already talked about that in the past. But in this case here, we're actually getting the reaction of someone within the community on what's going on with this. White privilege being shown in a pamphlet in this case is very minor compared to what's happening in our communities and societies today across America and even Canada and Europe as well, where there are classes that are sometimes mandatory at the college level to attend to learn about white privilege. And basically, if you're a white person, especially if you're a white male who's the worst of the worst, has to sit there and listen to about why you're such an evil to society. So here's a black mother who's upset at the pamphlet going home with her 8-year-old son. She said, "I think the message itself is inappropriate because yes, there is racism out there and they need to learn about it, but let the parents do that," she told WTVD. Because like I said, if she's teaching him the way she knows, it could be completely different from the way I know. And me being part of the black community, I know different from how the white community sees it. So obviously we were running into a whole other issue here for a second. This is basically saying, and I'm assuming because they didn't really give any details, but it seems like the teacher is white, okay? So now you have a white teacher explaining white privilege to black students, which is a completely different viewpoint than what the mother herself would have said to her son as well. And in this case, I'm actually agreeing with the mother in this case that she would have a better representation of the societal angles and how to approach this with her kid and find out the right time in his maturity to actually bring this to the forefront. Says, while Pabone insists that white privilege was discussed in class, a school district spokesperson says it was not part of the curriculum and that the pamphlet was organized by the school's parent-teacher association. Multiple PTA members told WTVD that the pamphlets were meant for parents, not the children. It's part of a larger initiative by the PTA's advocacy team, which started sending out related pamphlets in February during Black History Month. Okay, first of all, then we got a parent-teacher association problem here, okay? maybe that needs to be addressed. Being on the school board at one point in time, we ran into the Parent-Teacher Association, but not too much, surprisingly, actually, now that I think about it. So I don't even know where to go to interact with them or be part of their meetings, or if public can entertain their opinions in that setting or anything. I don't know too much about it, but they need to seek out that PTA in that school district and have words with them as well. The other part of this is that these pamphlets, if they were meant for the parents but sent home through the children, that's another fail right there in and of itself. If this was specifically meant for the parents and they knew that a situation like this may happen where the kids shouldn't be reading this type of thing because maybe they know better, then this school district should have put a little bit more money, or there should have been a fundraiser on the part of the PTA to raise enough money for stamps and envelopes and send it to the parents. Why was it going home through the student? To save money? Well, then you just bypassed the issue here, which is that the student ends up seeing what maybe you didn't want them to see. The whole thing just stinks to me. It doesn't make any sense because it just seems like they're trying to make up excuses at this point. But white privilege is a real big thing, and I, being a white male, am very evil. As a matter of fact, but I keep on telling my friends, I'm Italian. I understand white people are crazy, but I'm Italian, so leave me out of the situation. Thank you. So we've talked recently about the consequences surrounding transgender situations, not necessarily the person themselves, but possibly unintended cultural effects. In the last podcast, we talked about a transgender male wrestler decimating his competition because he was a female that is now taking testosterone and steroids, which otherwise would be illegal in a sport. Well, now you have two more stories that fall in line with that. From the Daily Wire, a man legally changes his gender so he can retire 5 years earlier. Genius? Problem? You decide. What sounded like an Argentinian version of Bruce to Caitlyn Jenner's story has turned out to be a rather brilliant early retirement plan by a humble tax worker, Sergio Lazarovich, that just wants some fairness and his pension. Last June, Sergio officially became Sergia, and Sergia officially became eligible to start drawing her state pension. But a member of Sergia's family has now blown the lid off the gender identity-based gender equity move, though what actions the state might take remain to be seen. It says it was remarkably easy, as the Daily Mail explains. Argentine law allows any person to change their gender on identity documents to match their self-perception without having to provide evidence of hormone treatment or gender reassignment surgery. Before we go on, we have to cover part of this topic here. Conservatives have been blasted for having issues with transgender people. That may be an opinion. That's an opinion based on the person that you talk to within the conservative movement and everything. But I think we have shown that while we have our own opinions on the situations and trying to just tackle all these trans issues, from transgender to transracial with Rachel Dusniel, and trans age, like the man up in the 45-year-old or whatever up in Canada who identifies as a 6-year-old girl. You have people that are trans species, where they cut off their ears and split their tongue and tattoo themselves to look like lizards, or people that walk around dressed as dogs and actually say that they're dogs because they're trans species. Whatever it is, we try to find a little bit of humor, the humorous angles in these types of things, and I think that some of this stuff is actually kind of funny. This man may be a genius. This woman may be a genius, finding a way to retire early, but this law right here shows something that we keep on talking about. It's not that the transgender people themselves and what they're going through or what they feel is the problem. It's how the laws surrounding these people are so open and more or less spoken laws at some, or policies at some points, that they aren't able to be grasped and nailed down to help control situations. Now, back when President Obama made it national law that transgender students or people could use whatever bathroom they associated with. It was a very open policy. Target kind of jumped on that and immediately, and still continues to show a loss in revenue because of their decision, which we as conservatives were saying this is going to lead as a spoken policy to people who are not transgender, who are predators, showing up in the opposite sex bathroom. Now, it's mostly unlikely that females would show up into a male bathroom claiming that they're male and everything. More likely, you're going to be more afraid of an overpowering male showing up into a female bathroom and when and if they get caught claiming to be a transgender female. But this opens up the door to people doing things, horrible things to both women and children in those situations. And that was, I think, our main concern, was this open policy that caters to past the transgender individuals and to the actual predators of society who are not transgender, who take advantage of those laws and policies. So in this case here, Argentinian law allows any person to change their gender or identity without actually providing any evidence of hormone treatment or gender reassignment surgery. So they can just do it on the fly and say whatever they want to say in order to achieve whatever they want to achieve. This kind of stuff, whether I agree or disagree with transgenders and what they do with their own bodies, shines a bad light on that lifestyle and movement right now. I was going to say as part of the LGBT community, but even some of them in the LGBT community are saying that that's a different thing because it has to do with gender and not sexual relations. I leave that to their community. But the fact remains that this kind of stuff does not shine a good light on it and keeps on showing some pretty negative things that go into it. So the person that came out and said this was a family member and said that his conviction is that it is unfair that because he is a man, he has to work 5 years more than a woman. Male privilege, right? You have to work more. And working is a great thing. That's a male privilege right there. What is he complaining about? So his relative went on to say he has been working on this for more than 3 years and was advised by lawyers. And the first plan was to make a complaint to the state citing discrimination, but it was an option that could have taken many years, and no one could guarantee that the court would rule in his favor. So you got to bypass the situation, get around the law. That's, these people, you got to read the rule book so you can find ways around. All right, we know some people like that in our own family. According to local papers, Sergia has only been in heterosexual relationships and has been married to the same woman for 25 years, never once showing an interest in living as a woman. And after being confronted about his alleged false identity, Sergia told a local paper that he has his own reasons for being a she. I don't have to explain anything to anyone, he said. She said. Zerzov. Zerzod. In another Daily Mail article, a transgender female weightlifter, which we just got done talking about a wrestler the other week, has a 25% advantage over her competitors at the Commonwealth Games due to her previous male life. A transgender kiwi weightlifter may have an unfair advantage over her fellow female athletes when she competes at the Commonwealth Games, an expert has warned. Longtime professional weightlifter Laurel Hubbard, 39, transitioned from a male to a female a few years ago. She will soon compete in the women's 90-kilogram plus competition on the Gold Coast, despite the protests of an Australian weightlifting chief. It will depend on the individual's physique, and it would depend on the sport we're talking about, Professor Heather told New Zealand's Radio Live program. But in general, males outperform females across most sports in weightlifting and strength sports. That male-to-female difference can be as high as 25%. A man transitioning to a female has physiological advantages that they take into their new female life based on their previous male life. What a bigot! Males and females are equal, man. There's no advantages. I don't know what the heck she's talking about here. I said she. It's a professor. I'll just leave it at professor because we can't assume either way. Men generally have bigger hearts. We do. Bigger lungs, stronger bones, bigger bone structures, and more muscle mass, according to Professor Heather, as she told the program. But not everyone agrees. British weightlifter Emily Campbell has publicly defended her friend Miss Hubbard from claims it's unfair to include her. Oh, this is going to be good. You're going to love it. Some competitors have defended Miss Hubbard from claims her participation was unfair, with one British athlete saying everyone should be able to do something they love. True. Some competitors have defended Miss Hubbard from claims her participation was unfair, with one British athlete saying everyone should be able to do something they love. That was again. At the end of the day, I believe everyone should be able to do something they love, and she qualified in her own right like the rest of us girls, Miss Campbell told the Daily Mail. Well, of course she qualified. If she's competing as a female and you have a strength advantage over the rest of the competition, you're going to more than qualify. You just damn near ran them over in the competition. Doesn't make any sense. They went on to say, I'm looking forward to competing against every single one of the girls in that lineup. Everyone has been very opinionated about it, but I think everyone is kind of forgetting about her feelings and how she feels. Well, yeah, the feelings matter, right? Not the facts, not the statistics, not the fact that this person is just going to dominate in this sport because of the physiological advantages to that person. We have to consider the feelings of that person. Well, feelings don't give an advantage to the other competitors to be able. You can't inject a steroid of feelings or emotions into your veins to suddenly get a boost as a female to compete against this former male. Feelings don't come into this equation at all. It's ridiculous to say that her feelings have anything to do with why she should be able to compete in this event. It doesn't make any sense. You know, if nothing else, we need to get to a point where there's transgender sports, because it's getting to be unfair. We talked about in one of the podcasts as well about the unfairness to females in very specifically. And we use the fact that in this sport, let's take this one for example, a male has transitioned to a female and is going to dominate the competition. Okay? So the females that are competing against her are going to lose. Okay, it's more than likely. The other side of the equation is a female that transitions to a male that then by some state laws can't compete as a male because of state laws. And this is a tricky situation, but then has to stay as she's boosting herself with testosterone and steroids to become a male and continues to compete as a female in the female sport. Also dominates. That's what the transgender wrestler did. So it's the females that continue to get screwed as the competition in these sports when this kind of stuff happens. They went on to say she is just doing something she completely loves. For someone to have a comment on it, I think, is a bit unfair. It's funny you use that word unfair, because I don't think you're reading the situation right on that one. Okay, and mini human brains with their own blood vessels are being grown in a California lab for the first time in a breakthrough that could help stroke victims. This is pretty cool. I'm all about leading edge on science and everything. Miniature human brains with their own blood vessels have been grown in a lab for the first time. After implanting the mini brain, which is only a millimeter long, into a mouse for 2 weeks, they found it had grown capillaries that penetrated all the way to its inner layers. The achievement could help researchers grow bigger brains in an effort to better study how the organ works. We have come to the point where we are growing human brains, not only growing human brains in a laboratory, which is amazing in and of itself, and ethical issues, that's a whole other topic. I would rather have a discussion with someone and kind of spitball ideas on that. But the fact that we're able to do that is pretty amazing. The fact that we can have mini brains that we implant into mice and they are able to use it, that's kind of scary. There's some mice running around California right now that are a little bit too smart for their own good, I think. And they're probably bullying those other mice, I gotta say. Scientists at the University of California at Davis are behind the latest findings. which is great because if any state needs to start growing brains, it's definitely California. I gotta give them that. The study was inspired by research from Dr. Ben Waldo, a vascular neurosurgeon at UC Davis, that focused on a rare condition called Moyamoya disease. That's what it's called. Patients, I almost got through the podcast without mispronouncing something. Patients have blocked arteries at the base of their brain, keeping blood from reaching the rest of the organ. To study the brain, often scientists use lab-grown cultures of stem cells. So again, this is a kind of a pretty cool thing that's going on with science. We're just seeing leaps and bounds over everything. One of the interesting things I had mentioned in one of the last podcasts too is the fact that someone recently had said that by the year 2030 we may virtually end diseases, which is pretty cool and pretty upsetting to those that want population control on the earth. But if we could get to that point, it would be pretty amazing. And the fact that we're growing brains, for crying out loud, may be signs that that person's not too far off their rocker with that kind of stuff. The Mirror reported that a chef cut up a steak in front of outraged vegans who were protesting outside of his restaurant. Take a second there, guys. Take a second. Just give this guy a round of applause. A restaurant owner responded to vegan demonstrators protesting outside his establishment by butchering a venison steak in front of them. So let's take a look at that real quick because that's good stuff.
And we don't even know if this is complying with health regulations. Police are here now talking to the owner about his dismembering of a deer in this dining area to taunt the activists.
I love it. I don't know. The best part is it's almost like the situations where police are interrogating someone behind the glass and you can't see what they're saying, but you could see the smirk on this police officer's face as she's confronting him. He's just like, hey, it's a steak. This is my business. This is what I do. I'm just kind of cutting up a steak here. Get off my back. If you're going to fight me, you might need some more protein. So get some of this steak in you, So it's just a really funny situation. This guy later goes on to leave the window, cook the venison, and come back, take a seat in front of the window, and eat the venison in front of the protesters outside, which was just great. So Michael Hunter, who owns Antler, the name of the restaurant, in Toronto, Canada, and dubs himself the Hunter Chef, good for you, took serious issue with the group, and the members of which were asking him to add vegan steak to his menu. What? Vegan steak? What the hell is that? Anyway, those advocating a plant-based diet said that Michael was taunting and provocative. Taunting, yes. Provocative? Yeah. The restaurateur, meanwhile, erected a sign of his own that read, "Venison is the new kale." Oh, I love it. Campaign leader Marnie Ugar, of course that's a vegan talking right there, said, "I chose Antler because their patrons feel good about eating ethical meat." Sure, yeah. "I believe there's no such thing for that one animal, no matter what kind of animal and how they were raised. That's their life and they don't want to die." When Michael came to the window carving into the leg of a deer, he looked like a crazed man unraveling in front of us, taunting a group who are there because they care about animal welfare. Okay, let that simmer for a second. I'll give you a personal story at the end of this because this gets way too good. Len Goldberg, an activist videographer for the vegan outreach group, said, "It's enough the poor deer had her life taken and had her family destroyed. That was an individual. She may have had a family. She may have had children. She may have had a partner. She had her herd, her friends, her personality, her desires, her feelings, her wants, her fears, her loves, her character, her heart, her soul." She knows a lot about deer, apparently. So everything about this story was just so good, okay? So now a personal story real quick. About a month ago now at this point, our one of our pastors had called us and said, would you be interested in getting a quarter of a cow of steak and meats and stuff? And we said, yeah, sure, because we know it's a cheaper route and better meat straight from the source and everything. We had never done it before, but we figured, what the heck. So he said, there's only one catch. You need to be there and butcher the cow yourself as well. Now, as you can tell from my videos in the past and everything we were doing, the last main topic I did was in regards to the Second Amendment. I am a huge Second Amendment supporter. That being said, I've never even went hunting, okay? And that just shows you the level of Second Amendment support I show, because without even going hunting and having a reason to defend the Second Amendment, I see multiple other reasons to defend the Second Amendment. So, being that I had never gone hunting in my life before, and I'm open to it if someone wants to invite me out, I just never went. I had never butchered anything, skinned anything, or cut up meat of any kind. So I said, sure, let's do it. And in the back of my mind, I was thinking of all the times I've run into friends of mine that became vegan or vegetarian or severely cut back on their meat intake because they said, if you knew where your meat came from and how it came to be, you would become a vegetarian. So I kept that in the back of my mind. I thought, okay, well, now's the time to pay and play here. We're going to find out what's really going on. So we went there. By the time we got there, the cow had been shot in the head. I'm going to get graphic on this, okay, because that's the way it happens. The throat was slit, and it was bleeding out. It was still alive by the time we got there. It was just brain dead and bleeding out. And we had to go through the process of personally getting involved and cutting into it and reaching in, grabbing the organs and pulling them as they were being cut out, skinning it. I got involved in doing that. And the vegans and vegetarians are right. It does make you think. As I sat there doing that, or stood there doing that to the cow, all I kept on thinking to myself was, that is going to be some damn good steak right there. I like that cut. If you could give me that cut, that would be good. So that's just a personal story. Hey, speaking of murder eating, the Daily Mail is reporting that a grave-robbing Filipino cult keeps human body parts stolen from cemeteries inside their mouths to give them invisibility powers. No, this is not a storyline from the new Avengers movie, unfortunately. A Filipino cult has admitted to robbing cemeteries to obtain human body parts, which they claim will make them invisible if they put them in their mouths. The group, known locally as Herring Bakay or Iron King, believe human remains grant them superhuman powers and hire grave robbers to get body parts for their stomach-churning ceremonies. These people need to get with the people from Madagascar, because that would be one heck of a party, I'll tell you. Iron King, bless her, and member Angelito Rambo, quotes, middle name Oretta, said devotees then fashion the human remains into belts or hold them inside their mouths in the belief that they will hide them from sight. Oretta said holding the grim good luck charms increase the power of your punches when brawling with enemies. That was a tongue twister. Not a tongue twister when you have one of these charms in your mouth, though, I'm sure. Oretta from Manila, he's the thriller from Manila. Sometimes you have to put it inside your mouth. That's what she said. Sorry. Which makes you invisible to your enemy's eyes, or at least they won't notice your presence. I have a feeling someone needs to test that theory, maybe a journalist, and go, nope, I can still see you, Frank. Iron King banded together to combat a Muslim insurgency in the 1970s with tales of fearless fighters charging in to hand-to-hand combat with armed troops. Now the group has found a foothold in the primarily Catholic nation with roughly 100 members in total, including policemen and soldiers who have reportedly joined for their own safety, despite the group being labeled a cult. So, in the 1970s, there were tales of fearless fighters charging into combat, supposedly invisible and with superhuman powers. The haka dance, yes. We actually witnessed that in Hawaii, too. The haka dance started in New Zealand, I believe, on the shores of New Zealand, when a sailor, and my wife can comment in there and I'm sure tell you who that person is because our kids just learned about it, but they sailed up in their boat, got to the shores, and saw these people doing this insane kind of ritualistic dance that they do. which is purposely meant to instigate the enemy. No, I'm not saying that these people can't be invisible by putting body parts into their mouths, but I'm guessing that maybe this had more to do with the fact that they were looking at some crazed individuals that looked more like zombies with flesh hanging out of their mouth that they were not too fond of going into battle against. Maybe they thought they were dealing with some insane people that were willing to die. I'm just going to throw that out there. Journalist Nikon Celis, who took part in the machete ritual and filmed the blesser handling the stolen body parts, said, "I can understand for some people this is crazy or disgusting." That's understatement. It could be seen as offensive to the family of the deceased. Why would you do that? But I respect their belief. Here we go, right there. This is that PC culture kind of coming out in a foreign story here in Manila, okay? Or is it, let me see here. That whole thing was in Manila, but it was a Filipino cult. So this PC culture is playing into, could it be offensive? Why would you do that? You got to respect their beliefs, man, No, sometimes you got to fight some things that are kind of way out there. So you don't always have to tolerate things, okay? Sometimes they rob graves themselves, and sometimes they pay a professional. Both ways are illegal, of course. That was a quote. That was a quote from the journalist who has to respect their beliefs. You gotta do it. Hey, I'm just eating some flesh, whatever. All right, I want to get to some updates on the national discussion on the Second Amendment and what is going on with the ridiculous representation of Parkland, Florida via David Hogg, Cameron Kasky, and Emma Gonzalez. But first, I would like to play a video from a man who stood in front of his representatives to lay down some hard truths on gun control in his neck of the woods. So let's take a look at that real quick.
I didn't have time to
You have to give us your name.
I'm sorry. My name is Mark Robinson. I live at 4015. That's right here in Greensboro. I've lived in Greensboro all my life. I didn't have time to write a fancy speech. I didn't have time to, I didn't have the resource of an English teacher to sit down and write a speech with at school today and be, brought over here or practice or anything. What I really came down here for is this. I've heard a whole lot of people in here talking tonight about this group and that group and domestic violence and blacks, these minorities and that minority. What I want to know is, when are you all going to start standing up for the majority? And here's who the majority is. I'm the majority. I'm a law-abiding citizen who's never shot anybody, never committed a serious crime, never committed a felony. I've never done anything like that. But it seems like every time we have one of these shootings, nobody wants to put the blame where it goes, which is at the shooter's feet. You want to put it at my feet. You want to turn around and restrict my right, constitutional right that's spelled out in black and white. You want to restrict my right to buy a firearm and protect myself from some of the very people you're talking about in here tonight. It's ridiculous. I don't think Rod Serling could come up with a better script. It does not make any sense. The law-abiding citizens of this community and many communities around this country, we're the first ones taxed and the last ones considered and the first ones punished when things like this happens, because our rights are the ones that are being taken away. That's the reason why I came down here today. Gun show or no gun show, NRA or no NRA. I'm here to stand up for the law-abiding citizens of this community, because I'm going to tell you that what's going to happen. You can take the guns away from us all you want to. You all write a law, I follow the law, I'll bring my guns down here, I'll turn them in. But here's what's going to happen. The Crips and the Bloods on the other side of town, they're not going to turn their guns in. They're going to hold on to them. And what's going to happen when you have to send the police down there to go take them? The police can barely enforce the law as it is. As what I see, we demonize the police, criminalize and vilify the police, and we make the criminals into victims. And we're talking about restricting guns? How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that when the police department's already hamstrung? You're not going to be able to go down here and take these guns from these criminals. So the criminals are going to hold on to their guns. They're still going to have them. They're still going to break in my house, and they're still going to shoot me with them. And guess who's going to be the one that suffers? It's going to be me. Well, I'm here to tell you tonight, it is not going to happen without a fight. And when I say fight, I don't mean shots fired. I don't mean fist thrown. I mean, I'm going to come down here to this city council and raise hell just like these loonies from the left do until you listen to the majority of the people in this city. And I am the majority. The majority of the people in this city are law-abiding, and they follow the law, and they want their constitutional right to be able to bear arms. They want to be able to go to the gun show and buy a hunting rifle or a sport rifle. There are no military-grade weapons sold at the gun show. An AR-15 is not a military-grade weapon. Anybody that would go into combat with an AR-15 is a fool. It's a semi-automatic .22 rifle. You'd be killed in 15 minutes in combat with that thing. So we need to dispel all these myths, and we need to drop all this division that we got going on here. Because the bottom line is, when that Second Amendment was written, whether the framers liked it or not, they wrote it for everybody. And I am everybody. And the law-abiding citizens of this city are everybody. And we want our rights, and we want to keep our rights. And by God, we're going to keep them, come hell or high water.
Boom! I love this guy. I absolutely love this guy. I salute you, sir. So let's talk about the premise of his argument here, which I think is the most important part, different from the the other arguments that are out there in regards to gun control and everything. He is talking, his main underlying issue is the majority, or the message is the majority, right? The majority of people, of gun owners, are responsible, law-abiding citizens. It's the criminals that are misusing things. Now, we don't overreact when a criminal uses a rented Home Depot truck to plow through a crowd and call for a ban on vehicles. We're going to get to a story later in London and talk about how that weapon isn't being called for a ban on it. But the interesting thing about the majority is this. There are over 320 million guns in the United States alone, okay? Less than 1% of those guns are used in violent crimes. And the majority of that 1% is then later broken down into the fact that the majority of those are suicides. This goes back and feeds into our last topic that we talked about earlier tonight of bullying. If the majority of people commit suicide, they're dealing with a great amount of depression. We have a mess in our society. People are depressed. People are committing suicide at high rates. We have a lot of our soldiers that are coming back. I think the number is 22 soldiers a day are committing suicide. There's a big problem that we have going on. I think that there's a hole in our souls that is missing, that we're seeking to fill with different things, and when we seek out some of those things, it leads to depression. I mean, there's no other way around it. I personally think a good example of that would be David Hogwash. I think he is an empty individual who's looking to fill it with fame, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a couple minutes here. But you know, the fact that there's a high percentage of suicides, that may be what we should be focusing on the most at this point in time, is the suicide rate, because those other numbers keep on going down. Okay, the overall statistic of crime in America has actually decreased, okay, over the last couple decades. We talked about this in the last podcast as well. I really encourage you to look it up. On the YouTube channel, we did the hot topic of the Second Amendment debate, and it went for over an hour discussion because we broke down everything from the Constitution to the Second Amendment right, what's an assault rifle, what is the AR-15, what are the typical excuses that are thrown out there in favor of gun control from the left, and what your responses should be, and what are the actual statistics that go into gun homicide rates and everything. And one of the things that really sticks out that I keep on bringing up to people is the fact that if you hear someone say that Australia banned guns and it worked, New Zealand banned guns and it worked, and Ireland banned guns and it worked and everything, you need to show them the statistics that, well, yes, after the banning, the gun homicide rate did drop. At the same time, at an almost equal level of an angle for the graph, I don't know, I'm searching for the word here, but the overall homicide rate actually increased. And those are statistics that people often get confused. Is the fact that gun homicide rates are obviously going to drop if gun confiscation happens and people turn in their guns, if people show up at the door and take your guns from you, that's going to happen. But then you also have guns that were illegally obtained that they're sure as heck not turning in their guns, and they're not in any type of record, so those criminals get to keep their guns. So the overall homicide rate goes up. Not because there's still guns in the hands of individuals who have seedy intentions. That's partially the reason for it, but also because they're finding other means to do it. An evil person is going to find a way to commit an evil act. Which goes back to the whole argument that it's not the guns that are killing people, it's the people that are killing people because of a societal mess that we've gotten ourselves into where we have a sickness to us. That people feel like they can resolve things by killing other people needlessly or warrantlessly. But not only are they finding other means to kill these people in those countries where gun bans took effect, it's also the fact that those people are also now definitely defenseless, right? The wolves, as we talk about wolves and sheepdogs and everything in military terms, and that's often how they talk about things. The military is sheepdogs over us sheep, and the wolves are the ones that are enemies out to get us in whatever capacity that is. The sheep are defenseless. They no longer are able to carry any type of weapon. And the wolves not only intend to do that harm anyway, but now are encouraged to do so because they know for a fact that they're defenseless. Sometimes someone may be deterred, as we learned in the Pulse nightclub shooting, which I totally forgot to bring up into this week's podcast, but it's very relevant. Sometimes people are deterred by armed individuals in going into a situation. If you didn't hear about the Pulse nightclub incident, what actually ended up happening 2 years later, we're now learning that it wasn't motivated by hatred towards homosexuals. Okay, it wasn't It was definitely a terrorist attack. The intention was originally, by records now showing, to go into Disney World and open fire there. There's video captured of him putting a gun or a rifle or rifles into a baby carriage, covering it up and walking around Disney World, but seeing armed security people there, deciding to leave. Then records show that on his phone, he specifically Googled nightclubs in Florida, in the Orlando area, not gay nightclubs, but just clubs, and found two. I forget what the name of the other one was, but then the other one was Pulse. He went to the first nightclub, found that there were armed security guards there. He went to Pulse, found, I guess that there was an armed security guard there as well, but felt that the other nightclub may be easier. I'm sorry, no, it was opposite. He went to Pulse, found that it was unarmed, went back to the other nightclub, and then eventually turned around halfway between the clubs and actually went back to Pulse and opened fire there. So it's a very misconstrued situation that has been lied about for the last 2 years now, that it was all in regards to him open firing on homosexual individuals because of his perceived sin of that, and that it was not a terrorist attack. It's exactly what it was. It was a terrorist attack, and we know that now. I got a little off topic there. But this video, he's talking about the majority and how the majority of us who are law-abiding citizens are the ones that always end up getting screwed by the actions of the few who break the law. And it's not our fault, and we have to be the ones that pay the consequences. Certainly not the law breakers, just the law-abiding ones. A classic example of how that can backfire as an argument for the left is David Hogwash's sister is now complaining that they have to wear clear backpacks to school so that they can see if there's weapons hidden inside. So the action of one student led to this right being infringed of privacy, and she's complaining about it. She doesn't get the irony of it at all either. So one of the characters in this whole discussion is David Hogwash, or David Hogg, as he's rightly called, I guess. Hogwash is what we like to call him. He recently decided to go toe-to-toe with Fox News personality Laura Ingraham after she slightly criticized him in a tweet. According to the New York Times, the dispute began Wednesday when Miss Ingraham shared an article about the student, David Hogwash, 17, getting rejected from colleges and accused him of whining about it. This is a rough tweet, so hold on. You may have to cover your children's ears. Her tweet read, David Hogg rejected by 4 colleges to which he applied and whines about it. Dinged by UCLA with a 4.1 GPA, totally predictable given acceptance rates. And then it linked to an article that specifically breaks down the criteria that's often used for UCLA. So it's actually based in fact. Which means that the only thing that could be considered offensive at all is when she used the word whines. Bad choice of wording? Maybe, possibly even. But enough to send Hogwash into a complete snowflake meltdown and using his current spotlight to go after her advertisers? Certainly not. In response, Mr. Hogg, who has rapidly become a prominent advocate for gun control policies, called on Miss Ingraham's advertisers to boycott her show. 8 of the companies, TripAdvisor, Wayfair, Hulu, Nutrish, Johnson & Johnson, Nestle, Atlantis Paradise Island, and Stitch Fix, said they were removing their ads. A 9th, Expedia, said it had recently pulled its advertising, but declined to say when. As news of the boycotts began coming out on Thursday, Miss Ingraham apologized, saying, on reflection, in the spirit of Holy Week, I apologize for any upset or hurt my tweet caused him or any of the brave victims of Parkland, she said, while also extending an invitation for Mr. Hogg to appear on her show. An apology. So going back to what happened with Lance and Greg in our past story, where Lance was bullied by Greg and Greg apologized for the negative attention brought to the district and not apologizing to the one that he bullied, Ingraham here is actually apologizing to Hogwash. So he probably accepted it, right? Mr. Hogg said he was unimpressed by the apology. She only apologized after we went after her advertisers. It kind of speaks for itself. So it wasn't good enough for him, right? And we're going to find out a couple more things that weren't good enough for him either in regards to actions being taken, which just goes to show that the agenda is greater than the truth, or in this case, the agenda is more important than progress actually getting done. David Hogwash is not interested in the national discussion. He's not interested in working with other people. He's interested in the fame itself and promoting an agenda that has to be accepted at 110% rate. Otherwise, it's not going to be good enough for him. So there is no compromise. There is no working with him or the people that support him. He wants it done his way. It's his way or the highway. Wayfair, an e-commerce company, said in a statement that it supports open dialogue and debate on issues, but that it would stop advertising on Miss Ingraham's show. The decision of an adult to personally criticize a high school student who has lost his classmates in an unspeakable tragedy is not consistent with our values, the company said. I think I get to this later on, but I'm just going to address it right now. For them to say that an adult is criticizing a high school student who lost the classmates in a tragedy is not consistent with their values. I'm sorry, but David Hogwash has put himself into the spotlight, the public spotlight, become a leader of a movement now, and did it with full intention of seeking a spotlight, okay? He's not like trying to run this from his computer as like a blogger at home trying to start a revolution. He is soaking in every instance of being shown in the media, like I was soaking up the sun rays of Hawaii. Okay, he is bathing in this attention right now. He has no intention of giving that up. He has no intention of being this pretty little boy who was shielded by everything. Until it comes to a time when he actually is criticized for things and then he runs behind that shield. But we're going to talk about that in a second too. Let me just check this real quick here. Telling the truth, Linda says. Thank you, Linda. Okay. So Mr. Hogg plans to study either journalism or political science, he said. He can, oh geez, could you imagine getting Hogwash as a senator somewhere? Science, or no, I'm sorry, it was political science. So journalism. this kid cannot enter journalism. Wait till you hear some of the stuff that he has actually said in interviews. He confirmed that he had been rejected from 4 schools: the University of California, Los Angeles, University of California, San Diego, and University of California, Santa Barbara, and the University of California, Irvine. So he's getting rejected from these schools. He has a 4.1 GPA. I'm not, first of all, congratulations to him. If he's able to achieve that, I don't know. I personally have a problem with the standards in public schools today. But when I was in school, I was considered among the class clowns. Didn't care at the time. I wish I could do it all over again and everything, and I would put more behind it and everything. Although I am very happy where I ended up job-wise right now. But I did not have anywhere near a 4.1. I'll just put it that way, okay? I could have done a heck of a lot better. So good for him for having a 4.1 GPA. I'm not bemoaning that at all. But maybe the reason why he's getting rejected isn't merely because of his grades or even his political stances. I don't think it has anything to do with him being in the media right now. Maybe it's the fact that they see a little snot that believes he knows more than adults and is unwilling to listen and learn, but instead feels he should be the one that's heard in every single situation. I wouldn't want to attempt to teach a little obnoxious kid like that either. Why would you want to be in the room with that? That is just going to be that student that raises his hand all the time to object to the teacher no matter what they're saying, just to have a counterpoint. He's one of those people that just has to have his voice heard, that counterpoint heard, and to call out people. That is a disruptor in the classroom, in any setting where you can't even get your work done as a teacher. Ben Shapiro, on the other hand, fought back against Hogwash's lack of acceptance of Ingram's apology in a series of tweets that read, "I look forward to Hogg's apologies to Republicans," which he said were sick effers. Dana Lash, who he said was hypocritical and disgusting for criticizing Broward Sheriff Scott Israel, and Marco Rubio, who he said was bribed by the NRA to give away children's lives. You may not like what Ingram said, you may disagree with it, I did, but it isn't remotely close to the level of viciousness with which Hogg has attacked people who disagree with him. I was Hogg's age when I started writing a syndicated column. I got hammered repeatedly, and some of it was justified. When you join the public discourse, you take on slings and arrows. That's even more true if you decide to maliciously align your opponents, as Hogg has. So again, this kid is feeling like he should be shielded from attacks because he is criticizing people that are attacking him, but he's a kid, so you can't attack him. Which is great, because in that same article that was written about Shapiro's response, John Porter, who wrote the article, also said, I'm sorry, this was coming from Louder with Crowder, though. He's a reporter for them. He points out that Hogg can't have it both ways. He can't throw stones, then act all hurty when someone lobs one back at him. So Hogg hits and hits, then hides behind, "You can't criticize us children." Laura, on the other hand, took the higher road and apologized. He didn't accept like a little elementary school kid when she could have easily have stooped to his level and said, "You can't attack me. I'm a woman and you are projecting your white male privilege." She could have easily have gone down to his level and done that. She could do that with any argument to lower herself to these types of people's argument levels. But she didn't. Obviously, she apologized. He refused to accept it, which says more about him than it says about her, especially since the only word that she used was whines. Okay, if you're going to melt down over that word, maybe you're not prepared for college anyway, despite your grades. CNN's Allison Camerata called out far-left activist David Hogg for once for his vicious attacks on Marco Rubio, suggesting that Hogg's vile rhetoric was going too far and was not constructive in helping provide solutions to problems. Hogg declared that Hogg, was not going nearly far enough in his attacks. So let's take a look at his response to that.
You know, I want to talk to you about Senator Marco Rubio because my eyes were opened when I was there. You guys have sort of targeted him as somebody who you don't think is doing enough and who you sort of depict as being callous. But, you know, I had a chance to talk to to Scott Beagle's mom. He, of course, is your geography teacher who was killed in the massacre. And she said that Marco Rubio, behind the scenes, has reached out to her, had all sorts of conversations with her, talked about how what they've done so far on Capitol Hill in terms of the Fix Nix Act, in terms of the Stop School Violence Act that's part of the omnibus. Yes, these are low-hanging fruit. Yes, you want more. But should you be giving credit for even these incremental steps, David?
I think it's important to realize that it's good that we're having these incremental steps, but just like we saw in Florida, where we rose the age to 21, you can still purchase a gun at the age of 18 if it's a private sale. And like with many of the laws that they're passing right now, where they tried kind of fixing the Dickey Amendment, they didn't give any more funding. What they did is they said, like, you officially can do research, but we just aren't going to fund it. And they're leaving a lot of loopholes in here and trying to seem like they are doing things, when in reality, these laws have more holes than Swiss cheese.
I understand, but I guess my point is that if you're trying to get everybody together, if you're trying to have solutions, do you think it is helpful when you say things like, Marco Rubio is putting, for $1.05 or whatever your coupon said, that's how much he values students? I mean, do you think that's unnecessarily provocative?
No, I think it's not enough I don't think it's even provocative enough, because Marco Rubio is still supported by the NRA, which works to ensure not the safety of gun owners and the safety of Americans everywhere, but to ensure that they sell more guns. And at the end of the day, so long as he is being paid by the NRA, he's not going to work to fix anything that is going to be concrete change. He's going to make laws that get him reelected, but actually don't have any major effect.
Whoa, 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 whoa. We got some problems in that statement here. Well, first of all, while Hogwash can't accept any progress from Rubio, because obviously nothing is enough unless you are doing exactly as Hogwash says, as I mentioned before, he also goes on to spread a false narrative based in ignorance. His reasoning is that continued support from the NRA is unacceptable because the NRA is just trying to sell more guns. The NRA does not sell guns, okay? And if he is talking about helping gun dealerships to sell more guns, they don't get a kickback for that either. They are simply there to support and protect the constitutional right of the Second Amendment. That is their purpose. That is where they advocate their sources to. But that isn't the first and probably won't be the last time that David Hogwash has outright lied about things in regards to this movement. In a stunning display of just what an arrogant little prick this guy is, we also have this video to show you as well.
Well, at this point, it's like when your old ass parents like, I don't know how to send an iMessage, and you're just like, give me the phone, and you take it and you're like, okay, let me handle it, and you get it done in 1 second. Sadly, that's what we have to do with our government, because our parents don't know how to use a democracy, so we have to. I think what sick are out there that want to continue to sell more guns, murder more children, and honestly just get reelected. What type of person are you when you want to see more money than children's lives? What type of person does that?
Yeah, David, swear your storm up, man, because that gets your point across better. Your curse words, you're so great, man. This is so immature for this kid to be the leader of this movement. This is who they have chosen, who, to get his points across, has to resort to foul language to get his point across. And you see this across the media all the time. Not cable media and everything, but people like Bill Maher have to curse. Unfortunately, some comedians out there have to curse to get their point across. And I was going to give examples, but there's comedians that curse all the time that used to have Comedy Central specials where they're not allowed to curse, obviously, that could get through the whole thing and made people fall in love with them in the first place without ever having to curse. So it just doesn't make sense anymore, and it just shows a lack of respect for people. To me personally, it shows that David Hogwash is a little jerk. Okay, someone that society shouldn't have to deal with in person and have to hear from. It tells me a lot about his parents and the values that they raised him with. It tells me that maybe his parents need to take a better look at their lifestyle choices as well and how they interact with people, because someone somewhere along the lines had become an example to this kid to feel like he could just go on camera and say these kinds of things the way he's saying it. But beyond that, obviously, okay, you're a teenager, you feel like cursing is your way of getting points across, so be it, okay? Your followers are immature like you as well, so it doesn't really matter. Here's the point, though. David, this is not a democracy, okay? And it certainly isn't a democracy either at that point, if that helps to get the point across to you a little bit better. A little research can go a long way when you take up the mantle of leadership for a movement. Maybe you should start taking the time to research your movement that you're being a leader of while you're not going to school, because you're not going to go to school, obviously, until things change in your favor. And by your favor, obviously, we mean 110, 120%. While you're not in school, in between being pimped out by the media like CNN and putting you on every 2 hours for your uneducated, immature opinion on the matter, maybe you should be Googling some things and looking into it. For one, I know that kids like you probably don't really like saying the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, but at one point in time it says, "To the Republic for which it stands." That's kind of a dead giveaway. Maybe your school in Florida or wherever, and you're one of those people that has to kneel down or whatever the heck you do, okay? Maybe you're one of those new Tide Pod eating, condom snorting people, but the fact remains, it's a republic, not a democracy. So that's lie number 2 that you're trying, or a false narrative at least, that you're trying to spread in the meantime. Let's go on though. How about when he first attacked Dana Lash? They originally referred to her as the CEO or president of the NRA. She is just recently become the spokeswoman for the NRA. All right, she is not in any big leadership type position. She got her own show, thank God, because it gives her an opportunity to hit back at these types of individuals. It's just ridiculous. False narrative number 3 right there for you. Let's go back to CNN for a moment, though, and Alisyn Camerota's interview for possibly one of the most cringeworthy interview segments of bias in a long time. And obviously over the last 2 years, we've seen some crazy bias in the news. But while we may applaud Alisyn Camerota for her challenging hogwash, I can't forget that, for her challenging hogwash on his narrative against Marco Rubio, we can applaud that. Okay, it's nice to see someone at CNN stand up once in a while and actually be a journalist and not just supporting a narrative. Then you run into this one.
David, I am stunned that 4 colleges rejected you. What kind of dumbass colleges don't want you? I mean, you've taken the country by storm. How do you explain this? Did they reject you before the Parkland massacre, or how do you explain this?
They rejected me about 2 weeks ago, most of them. It was UCLA and UCSD. The way I explain it is we have a heavily impacted university system in America, and I think there's a lot of really good candidates that don't get into college, and I think it goes to show that regardless of whether or not you get into college, you can still change the world. The hardest part is just believing that you can and continuing that effort to change the world, because you eventually will.
Heal the world, make it a better place. Gotta be a David Hogwash. Okay. So Alisyn Camerota is obviously being a little overboard on brown-nosing the situation with David Hogwash. What kind of college wouldn't accept you? You're such an exceptional human being. My word, what is going on in the world? As Mike would say, cats and dogs living together. Where do I put my hands? Watch where you put your hands, Alisyn, because it's you may get hit with a not Me Too movement type situation there. So that's kind of disgusting journalism as far as I'm concerned. What she did there, and then for him to go off about, oh, you can make a change, man. Need to mature a little bit. As I said in the last podcast, we talked about his fellow student, which we're actually going to talk about very shortly here too, Cameron Kasky, who's probably the second most popular activist of the Parkland students, who went on Bill Maher with David Hogwash and said, how dare you criticize us students? We are the experts because we had AR-15s pointed at us, and you don't know the situation, and you can't have an opinion on the situation unless you've been there and you've been a part of that. So now he's Cameron, how dare you, Kasky, in my mind. But in regards to that, I said, that's just like me as a cancer survivor going into the hospital and saying to the doctors, I see what you're doing there, removing that tumor. Can I suggest something different? As a matter of fact, no, I'm not asking to have you do something differently. I'm demanding something be done differently because I've had cancer. So I'm an expert. Obviously, I've been through it. You're a doctor for cancer. You've never had it, so you can't. You're not an expert like me. So if you could just cut this way instead, that might be better. I mean, it's so ridiculous to think that you're an expert just because you've been through a certain situation. But again, I will give a semi-benefit of the doubt that we have all been that age at some point in time and felt that we were running the world and that we knew everything. And then you get like 5 years down the road, you get through college, maybe even in college you have a realization. Most times you don't. And you get out of college, the real world hits you in the face with everything that is reality, as we like to say. And you realize you didn't know squat. You didn't know much at all. So, maybe we need to wait for that maturity there for him to come to that maturity, but it is what it is. And Allison Camerata, it's so sad that we had to praise you in one and knock you down in another one. So is it professional journalism? Certainly not. Before we leave David Hogwash for the other student activists, for a while there, it upset me too. People were claiming that Hoggy was a crisis actor because he turned up in a news story on the West Coast. This is now proven true, the news story, not him being a crisis actor, by this news story. So let's take a look at this and get some thoughts on it after that. Okay.
David Hogg says his 17-year-old friend put his boogie board on this beach trash can. And when a lifeguard asked him to move it, he did. But then the situation took a turn.
He said, I didn't know it was a crime to put your board on the trash can. Because he just didn't want it to get sandy.
That's when David says the lifeguard approached and he started recording.
We clear?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. I'm not your parents.
No, you're not, so why don't you off?
I don't know you.
I don't
You've
either.
never been down here, so don't think you're going to come down here and lip me.
David posted the video on YouTube and in just a couple of days has gone viral.
We felt threatened. We felt we're just worried, and he seemed unpredictable.
Oh, that unpredictable authority figure on the beach that's not apparent for these individuals. So it seems like David was out there on vacation. Crisis actor, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that that's a negative. But what I will say is that this shines a big light on David Hogwash and the company that he keeps, the two of those. This kid is obviously seeking attention and fame and has a history of showing a lack of respect and demeanor. Again, where are his parents in this situation? How did he show up in this news story and his parents see this and them not say to him, guys, whether the lifeguard was right or wrong, he is the authority figure on that beach. He's there to save lives and keep things under control. You have to kind of respect that. We just got done having our kids being watched by a family friend and everything, and we said they are in control of that situation. You have to listen to them while we're gone because we are giving them the authority. That is essentially what we're doing to lifeguards. Otherwise, lifeguards would be held accountable for deaths if they just sat up on the post and watched people drown and said, oh, I don't really have to. I mean, whatever. But this kid and the company that he keeps shows a complete lack of respect and demeanor towards other people. It's obviously been learned from role models in his family or even the school district. I'm not sure. I'm going to guess it's the family because there's some people like Kyle Kushev who is coming out of the school district who actually have constructive things to say without having to resort to demeaning people, making up stories, false narratives, lies, and cursing to get their point across. So I'm gonna stretch it to the fact that it's probably something to do with a bad family unit. But David Hogwash is, like I said, far from the only student from the school that's leading this movement that is not only spreading lies but also showing their true colors. Cameron How Dare You Kasky recently tweeted, "The First Amendment has restrictions. The Second Amendment has no restrictions." These weapons are not in the hands of well-regulated militias. The changes that people are demanding do not desecrate the Second Amendment. They just make it a safe addition to our Constitution. Two things here. Number one, they can say all they want that they are not out to take the guns from people, okay, all guns, but you go there, you can look up multiple on the street interviews of people at the March for Our Lives rallies and people being interviewed, and there are plenty of people in the movement that are saying, yeah, it's time to take all the guns. I've posted a picture of a guy with a sign that says, okay, I will pry it from your cold dead hands, in reference to Charlton Heston speaking in front of the NRA years ago. There's people that are saying, yeah, we want to come for the guns because they have no place in society, no place at all. Even when you give them examples, what if I'm cornered in my house, the intruder has a gun, should I not be able to shoot them? No, you should not be able to shoot them, because we've seen stories like this where the intruder becomes the victim. They got shot, oh my gosh, and they're still alive. The one mother whose son was shot dead because he went into the house and tried to attack the man, she's like, oh, he was just a child, what was going on? I mean, oh, he had his whole life to live. Yes, even the guy that was older, the victim was older, he still had life to live too. It was going to be one or the other. Thankfully, it was the person breaking the law that was shot dead, and I think you should have done it again and again. But that being said, once again, this is complete ignorance is on full display by Kasky, showcasing his lack of research, which happens to be what's going on with David Hogwash as well. Here are just some of the restrictions on the Second Amendment that already exist that he can look into in the meantime. So write this down. Like I said, between your being pimped by CNN and Bill Maher and everything, you can actually take a look at this. MSNBC pimps them out too. Google some of this stuff. The National Firearms Act, the Arms Export Control Act of 1976, the Gun Control Act of 1968, the Firearm Owners Protection Act, and the Brady Law, just to name a few. Not to mention the fact that you have to be 18 to buy a rifle, 21 to purchase a sidearm, and multiple other things. You have to go through background checks and everything. It is a restricted amendment. So either you know that, either you don't know that and you're ignorant, okay, which you guys are kind of showing a lot here, or you do know that and you are being blissfully arrogant on the situation and trying to spread a false narrative, which seems to be the case most of the time with you guys down there. Perhaps even worse, and this is going to tie up a lot of our stories tonight, is Emma Gonzalez and her recent remarks at a rally. While these students are protesting the Second Amendment and trying to do everything they can to place sole blame on the guns themselves, Emma admitted that she and others were basically the ones who bullied the shooter. So let's take a look at what she had to say.
Since he was in middle school, it was no surprise to anyone who knew him to hear that he was the shooter. Those talking about how we should have not ostracized him, you didn't know this kid! Okay, we did!
Okay, so he's a weird kid. All right, obviously a lot of these shooters, like the theater shooter during the Batman, not Batman Begins, the other one, Dark Knight, okay, with Heath Ledger as a Joker. This kid went in dressed up as a Joker, I think, and shot up the movie theater. Like a lot of these, 9 out of 11 of the last mass shooters have had psychological disorders. I think it was 9 or 10 of them also didn't grow up with a father figure in the home. These are kind of statistics that no one really wants to talk about in these rallies and everything. But in regards to this, yeah, the kid was weird, but that gives you the ability and permission to then ostracize and go after him and bully him. You're no better than Lance when he was a kid, okay? Did this lead directly to the shooter, who we don't name, going into the Parkland school and shooting it up? Maybe. I would certainly say it has something to do with it. So while they're trying to blame the guns, we're not looking at the real issue of the shooter themselves, which I got to say, Gonzalez there, Emma, you may be one of the main sources of why this kid went off the handle and actually committed this crime. So you're partially to blame, in my mind, a hell of a lot more than the gun that was used. Okay. I also said we haven't had a national movement against bullying for some time now, and here she is saying that people didn't know him like they did and they were allowed to ostracize him. Not that that could have had anything to do with him being driven to shoot up the school, obviously. According to CNN, all the nonsense dribble coming from the Parkland Five may be leading to something they are probably not too happy about. Donations to the NRA have tripled after the Parkland shooting. In January, the NRA collected almost $248,000 in individual contributions. In February, they collected more than $779,000. The Nonpartisan Center for Responsive Politics, which tracks political spending, tracked itemized contributions, donations of $200 or more by an individual, in the days before and after the shooting. According to their data, in the 2 weeks after the shooting, itemized contributions to the NRA doubled from the previous 2 weeks. They also found the number of people contributing in the 7 days after the shooting increased almost 500% from the week before. The Center for Responsive Politics says it's unclear what caused the spike, whether it was NRA outreach or President Trump's comments after the shooting suggesting he might support tougher regulations on guns. Personally, I would like to thank Hogwash, Caskey, and Gonzalez because I think their insane rhetoric and push for government overreach is exactly what led to this. By the way, March donations, I don't know by the numbers where they were, but you could add our contributions in there. I've been talking and thinking about joining the NRA for years, but not being a hunter, I didn't. And after listening to these idiots go after the NRA and spread false narratives and everything, yeah, we need people supporting and defending our Second Amendment with a louder voice of contributions from all the people that support that to go up against these ridiculous narratives. So, proud member. In what I consider even funnier news, the 15-year-old son of InfoWars Alex Jones challenged Parkland survivor activist David Hogg to a debate over guns. The site posted a video featuring Rex Jones, who is seen in his father's seat during a monologue, blasting Hogg for his part in the public campaign pushing for stricter gun laws in the United States. He said, "Hogg, you claim that the establishment is shaking in its boots in fear of you. No, they love you. They love gun control. They've wanted this for years." The InfoWars video is interspersed with clips of Democratic politicians speaking of the need to enact laws against assault weapons. It is admitted that they want to disarm the American people just as they have done with so many corrupt regimes in the past, Rex Jones said. Rex Jones blasted Hogg as a child human shield by the mainstream media so that you can go out and make outrageous statements without anyone being allowed to rebuke you. That's 3 of us saying that now. So am I the only one that finds this incredibly funny and sad at the same time? We have gotten to the point that Hogwash has become a ringleader of a circus act, and then we add a Jones clown into the mix. This could seriously be the pay-per-view of our lifetime if Hogwash agrees. Can you imagine what that would be like? Excuse me. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's main event. In this corner, we have a self-entitled, disrespectful little snot who is being pimped by the media, especially CNN, at least 3 times a day, who feels his opinion on gun control is adult enough to sway political policy and yet when challenged, falls behind his shield of he's just a child and shouldn't be criticized. He's been indoctrinated for 2/3 of his life already, doesn't understand the Constitution and basic human rights. You may have seen him using the First Amendment to blast the Second Amendment while also pushing a strong anti-Fourth Amendment to actually seize our property, all while spouting that the Constitution is outdated. He steps away from a #MeToo movement with Allison Camerata. It's David Hogwash! And in in this corner, straight out of nowhere, literally. No one's heard of this kid except for the legal custody battles of his parents over the past couple years. We have the son of a radio host whose main topics are chemtrails, fluoride turning frogs gay, school shooting survivors being crisis actors, Sandy Hook being a staged event, someone who rips off his shirt to push a supplement brand of his own, and notably, recently, someone who interviewed a professional who knows that NASA is abducting children, sending them off in spaceships to Mars and holding them as hostage as slaves to working colonies that our satellites can't see. You can't make this stuff up any more than they already have, folks. It's Rex Jones! I've been waiting to do that. That was fun. Before we end the topic for the night, I think it's worth noting that articles are currently coming out about London crime where guns have been banned. Several sources are headlining that knife attacks are propelling London to outpace New York City's murder rate for the first time in modern history. In February, the UK capital outpaced New York City's murder rate for the first time in modern history as London experienced a surge in knife attacks. Both cities have roughly the same population, and in the month of February, 15 people were murdered in London, whereas New York City recorded 14 homicide deaths, reports the London Times. London is set to outpace New York City's murder rate for March as well. By late last night, there have been 22 killings in the capital, according to the Metropolitan Police, against 21 in the U.S. city, notes the Times. 8 of those murdered in March happened in a span of just 7 days. Since 2014, excluding victims of terrorism, the number of London murders has risen by a stunning 38%. London has also seen an epidemic of acid attacks in recent years. Acid attacks happen to be a calling card of Islamic extremists, in case you didn't know. And they have that problem over there as well. You can also research into no-go zones in London, which Germany has finally admitted through Chancellor Merkel that is a problem, and she finally had to admit to it because of the crime statistics. The Fight for Peace charity head in the capital, Jacob Whittingham, what an English name, proper, is perplexed by the random violence. What's scary about London is the randomness of the crime, he said. With young people in London, you have no idea if and when you may be the victim of a violent crime. That's why they feel the need to carry weapons. Let me repeat that. That's why they feel the need to carry weapons. This is in London. Metropolitan Police Commissioner Cressida Dick blames social media. Dick said websites and mobile phone applications such as YouTube, Snapchat, and Instagram were partially to blame for the bloodshed, reports the Evening Standard. Fatal stabbings in England and Wales are now at their highest levels since 2011, rising by 12% in the year ending 2017. Okay, so what do we have here? Now that guns aren't able to be used, they have resorted to a different weapon, knives. And if we go ahead and do a knife confiscation, what are we going to be cutting our steaks with spoons? Maybe sporks. Sporks would probably work a little bit better, but those rigid edges on sporks, that's kind of dangerous too. You could poke an eye out with one of those things. Evil finds a way. There is good and there is evil in the world, and evil will always find a way to hurt other people. Doing this kind of stuff, you've just disarmed good people, law-abiding people, as our citizen hero said earlier in the video in that council meeting. And you have turned sheep even more defenseless, so you've basically cut off their legs and not even allow them to run anywhere at this point. But listen, it's all stuff that's coming together. I think that this Second Amendment debate is ongoing. Unfortunately, David, Hogwash, Cameron, don't you dare, or how dare you, Kasky, and Emma Amaboli Gonzalez are still in the media, unfortunately, still being pimped out by the media every moment they can to pursue and project an agenda that the media understands more than these kids do. Unfortunately, they haven't gone away after their rally, which, by the way, is another statistic that you might be interested in. A nonpartisan organization did some research into the rally. I forget exactly who it was offhand because I didn't put it in the script tonight. But they found that 90% of those that attended the March for Our Lives rally were not children, not students. These were all adults. When polled, a majority of them were there because they opposed Trump. And it wasn't necessarily the gun ban that they were interested in. It was just because they opposed Trump. There were many leaders from the Women's March back in February of last year. And the makeup was all over the place, but it was more in regards to an agenda against Trump than anything else. 10% of those people were students, and let's be honest, they didn't know what the heck they were talking about anyway, as you can see in multiple interviews across YouTube with some of the participants of the rally. But listen, it was a lot of good topics tonight. I really felt it was important to cover the superintendent situation down in Texas, because when you talk about alleviating bullying situations, I think that's a classic example of what can happen to a bully that's not checked. Okay, I think it's important to keep up with what's going on with the false narratives and lies being spread by David Hogwash, Cameron How Dare You Kasky, and Emma I'm a Bully Gonzalez. They continue to make the media all the time and spread these false things and pursue an agenda that they aren't even interested in a conversation. A conversation happens between two sides coming together. They're interested in just being heard and getting their point or their agenda done without any compromise. So I appreciate everyone tuning in tonight and listening. If you're listening to the podcast, we'll see you next time. Have a great night, and God bless America.